And my name is Sherry Corrier. I am with the Patterson Foundation here in sunny Sarasota, Florida. And we are here on our workshop number 5 of our National Philanthropy Scan series. Just have a few things to go over with you today as we prepare. We're going to be looking at how our funders are bridging the digital divide and using data to drive strategy and impact. A few little housekeeping items as well in our next slide. As we're mentioning, if you can rename yourself, introduce yourself in the chat box right now, be great. We like to keep that information and chat with you throughout the session. Please mute yourself so our presenters have an opportunity to present their information. Raise your hand digitally, of course, if you have a question. Later on, we have a really exciting Q&A portion with the presenters. Please feel free to join in. And also on the screen, you've seen some other areas of Twitter uses that you can use, the various hashtags. And we also do always provide an after action survey so we can improve, make our sessions better, but also share out all of the information so you can pay full attention. And we also at the end will have an opportunity for you to sign up for our future workshops in our chat area at the very end. In our next slide, I just want to take this opportunity to say a few things about the Patterson Foundation. Our main goal is strengthening the efforts of people, organizations, and communities in ways that foster wide participation. And as you heard, we've been focusing for the last several months on the National Philanthropy Scan. Today, we have a great set of presenters. First, I'd like to thank our co-host of this series, the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. In our next slide, we offer a little bit about the funder to funder conversations in partnership with the campaign. And we sincerely want to thank Sarah Torian and the group at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading for helping to spread the news about these funder to funder conversations and sharing with us in perfection of all of the details. Thank you, Sarah and team. Next, let's move right on to our presenters. And today we have a great lineup of presenters. You should have all received the bio and background of pre-reading material for our presenters. Those were sent out in advance. We want to give all the time we can to our presenters. Today we have Kate Mache with the Essex County Community Foundation, Evan Horowitz with the Tufts University Center for State Policy Analysis, and Marvin Vinay with Tech Goes Home. Next, I'd like to introduce our facilitator today on our team, Rachel Hedinger. Rachel is a fellow at the Patterson Foundation. And Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you and thank you for all your hard work on making workshop number 5 happen.
Thank you everyone so much for being here. I'm going to give a little background on the National Philanthropy Scan. Today I'm filling in for my colleague Michael Zimmerman, who actually conducted the National Philanthropy Scan with Sherry Corrier and put together that amazing document. So what happened was, with digital access, we wanted to know, what are other funders doing in this space? What are other foundations doing in this digital space? And what other resources are out there? So Michael used his connections along with Sherry to conduct this nationwide scan and search and interview other funders, other foundations, and find out who else cares, who else is out there, and what are they doing in this space. And that's really how the National Philanthropy Scan came to be. Within that document, there's several different components, including one on data, hence today's session. And we wanted to share those components with all of you and more. So at the Patterson Foundation, we believe in something called sharing your cookies, where we take our lid off our cookie jar and share our cookies with everyone else. So basically just sharing this knowledge that we've learned and these resources with everyone else, because when we share those things, we can learn a lot more and do a lot more together. So as this funder workshop is titled, How Can Funders Bridge the Digital Divide Using Data to Drive Strategy and Impact? We are grateful to be joined by leaders who ventured into uncharted territory to see what's possible. So I'm going to turn things over to Kate Mache, Marvin Vinay, and Evan Horowitz to give us a presentation about what they have done in Essex County.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. And if we want to bring up the slides and perhaps take everyone through this and then be open for the discussion period. So thank you all for having us. We can switch to that next slide. Oh, I think I might have been muted. There we go. So we are the Essex County Community Foundation. So I represent the 34 cities and towns north of Boston. We are a traditional community foundation, which we won't go into all the details there, but with donor advised funds, have been around about 25 years. But one thing that we do as an investment strategy is systems change, which we call systems philanthropy. And that is a data-driven process, community aligned and collectively engaged. And I'll let you, take all this in on our flywheel here about the way we do our work. So we initiate our work always with data, which is why I'm so happy to be joined by my colleagues, Evan and Marvin, today to really tell that story holistically of how ECCF got to this space. So next slide. So sometimes in our systems change efforts, sometimes we lead and sometimes we partner. So everything on the right in the light blue, we have your right in the light blue, we've partnered on, and anything in the darker blue, we are leading that effort. So I lead the digital equity effort here, and you can see that's new in green. That is our newest initiative and what we'll be focused on today from a systems change standpoint. We collaborate in this process with over 2,000 organizations, have impacted over 55,000 individuals in our county, which we're about 800,000 individuals that live in the 34 cities and towns north of Boston in Essex County. And then if we can move on, we'll turn it over to Evan to explain the data process.
Thanks, Dave. Next slide. Right, so I run the Center for State Policy Analysis at Tufts, and we do independent, nonpartisan data work for a variety of folks. We do it for the state legislature, we do it for executive agencies, we do it for philanthropies, we do it for community foundations, we do it for lobbying groups, anybody who wants to really understand what's going on the ground so they can make the best possible decisions about policy and improving people's lives. We're there to help. And we worked with ECCF around a couple of reports on digital equity, where we tried to do a few things. One, we mapped the digital divide across Essex County. This is in a very granular way, getting a sense of who has good broadband access, who doesn't, community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood. We also interviewed experts, leaders, and advocates in local hotspots. So once we identified problem areas, we went to talk to people on the ground to see what their experience was, whether we were really understanding what was happening, and how best to intervene. And the last was to identify patterns by income, race, ethnicity, age, and beyond. So where were there systemic inequities in the availability of broadband across towns, within towns, by race and ethnicity? Next slide. So just some of our findings, just to highlight. One, this is a map of the equipment gap. That is where or in what cities and towns people are most likely to lack computer hardware. I should say the map is identical or nearly identical for where people lack high-speed broadband access. 1 of every 5 Essex County households lacks the basic computer. Same number lacks access to strong high-speed broadband. It's particularly pronounced in cities and lower-income areas. Next slide. But it's not unique to those cities and low-income areas. What you're seeing here on the right is the overall broadband rate for a couple of towns, cities and towns that we highlighted. That's the blue column. But then the broadband rate for families earning less than $35,000 in those towns. You can see even in towns with very high access rates, over 80%, you still have families earning less than $35,000 who are really struggling to get internet access, right? It's not low-income towns so much as it's low-income families, wherever they happen to live. Next slide. And this has obvious implications for racial equity. One of the things which you're looking at the right here is a breakdown, the share of households with high-speed broadband, white and non-white, and you can see there's a significant gap, right? White families, about 80% of white families have access to broadband, only about 64% of non-white households. And this holds across various demographics. Note the bottom, it also holds across income. So just correcting for income doesn't make this go away. In fact, white families earning $50,000 have more reliable access to broadband than non-white families earning $100,000. So this is not an economic issue, there's a racial overlay. Next slide. And one question that we looked at in the second of these reports is about ACP, the federal program to provide subsidies for low-income families looking for broadband. And there definitely seems to be some places where this program is reaching people. And what you're seeing here is sort of town by town, some communities where there is a lack of access to broadband, that's the blue, and where the share of households in the subsidy program is substantial. Those would be the top cities in the third column, Lawrence, Lynn, and Haverhill, and others where households lack access to broadband, but the ACP program doesn't seem to be reaching them. Those would be the towns at the bottom. Next slide, although I believe that's the last slide. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Evan. I think just to give folks some context about what Essex County is like, what it looks like, right? We've seen some snippets of data that Evan shared, but there was a lot to digest. We have 2 full reports that we'll share out with you all so that you can read them at your leisure if you want to reference them, right? So a lot of data content, but we really need to put that into context. So as we said before, from a systems philanthropy or systems change effort as a funder, we really wanted to make sure that we were going out into the community and also getting qualitative and quantitative data to really understand how that worked. Among our 34 cities and towns north of Boston, 6 of those cities are considered what the Massachusetts State Legislature calls gateway cities. These are historic underinvestment areas. They are anchors, economic anchors for the rest of the communities and towns around. So you have a mix of, higher income, small towns, as well as these cities mixed in together. So what we looked at here was this isn't just a rural issue. This is a rural and an urban issue. And we wanted to make sure we had these conversations, and something that Marvin is really going to talk about further on when we get to his piece. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So what we did was we got this data back. We went out into the community. We had to bring the data back into the community, held open sessions, had conversations with over 300 nonprofit leaders, individuals, members of the legislature, others within the community to talk about what did digital equity or digital divide at the time mean to them and how is it impacting them, so we could create our strategy. And through that process, and through all these conversations, etc., we focused on the neighborhood level. And as you saw from Evan's data, we de-aggregated that data. So as a county as a whole, we could look like we're doing okay. If you de-aggregate it neighborhood by neighborhood, which is what Evan did, which is fantastic, or by census tract, you could really see where investment would really have an immediate impact on that neighborhood. So what we did is by working with our community and community-driven process, we decided to make a strategy investing in access devices literacy and a coalition. So we wanted to bring people together, want to make sure people were sharing across the county, and get people connected. So that $3 million investment over 3 years, which we're about halfway through, with that systems approach. So we're working together, we're maximizing that investment, including with our legislative colleagues. And then we expected, and you'll see here in red, is the connection of households. We originally started with connecting 10,000 individuals to the internet. After getting Evan's data, after going out into the community, and saw the success we were having, we raised that goal to 20,000. Provide 5,000 devices, train 1,000 learners in digital literacy, and engage in the coalition. We originally had a goal of getting 100 people over 3 years to be part of our coalition, anyone interested in digital equity in our county, and we've quickly raised that now to over 250. So I'm really trying to give from a funder standpoint, a view to you all how we've pivoted based on the data we had and the feedback we're getting from the community. So next slide, please. So in access, here's a picture of one of the neighborhoods we've put up free residential housing in, internet access in the housing space. We haven't gotten to tackling that issue yet. So we've worked with 9 communities, 11 organizations so far, 9,000 residents with access. So you can see we're about halfway to our goal, about halfway into our initiative. So we established traditional community-based centers, right? We all know pre-COVID, we could go to a library or some sort of public space to get internet access, which we did, but we tried to think a little bit outside the box, and we stood up about 15 to 20 of those all around the county. So from YMCAs to library infrastructure, traditional forums, but also thought outside the box into food pantries, homeless shelters, and other places that were a little bit new for folks. And then we've pivoted to a residential model. So you can see that picture there in our neighborhood of about 4,000 Latinx individuals in the city of Salem. And then we're doing the same thing in another one of our gateway cities across the county in the city of Lawrence. So that would bring on another 6,000 individuals. So if we can move to the next slide, please. And devices, we're piloting the first Essex County nonprofit e-recycler. So we've helped incubate now a nonprofit that's leading the effort called Tech Collaborative. Here are some photos here of some of the individuals that have received machines. We're working in 20 communities. We have 100 partner organizations. We delivered 643 in the pilot of devices. So they're usually Chromebooks, and then almost 4,000 over the past 12 months. We're on track, you can see clearly, to exceed our 5,000 devices. And so we're not treating these as silos. As you can see, you know, from that original slide, we had each initiative was a box, and you'll see how that evolves over time, right? But we found that devices started layering in the neighborhood, in that Salem neighborhood, when we put up the free internet. We needed to test that. So we needed to test that on devices that were all equitable and all the same, so we could see whether the signal was getting to the third floor and the first floor, et cetera. And we were able to deploy our devices to allow us to do that. Next slide, please. And we've built that coalition with cross-sector engagement here. We put up a little visual here so you can see where our communities are coming from, where our members are coming from. And we continue with those quarterly meetings and have had 7 coalition meetings so far. And through that process, we've seen live how the systems effort is happening, right? Where you hear one city listening to another one present and say, wait a minute, we can try that too. We can pilot that here too. Maybe it doesn't look the same, but let's look and be aggressive about making community-driven investments for what works for that neighborhood. And we have the data from Evan to show us where those investments should really come from. And to the next slide. And finally, our literacy investment, which we feel has touched all of these aspects, right? Access, literacy, equipment, which is why we'll have Marvin talk about that. And so thank you, Marvin. But it is the first regional digital literacy program in Massachusetts, and the only one in New England. And we have a quote here from how it's impacting one of the users. And I will turn it over to you, Marvin, to talk about this case study.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us to participate today, and hope that this information we provide is useful. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Tech Goes Home. We are an organization that's been around for about 20 years with a mission of empowering communities to access and use digital tools to overcome barriers and advance lives. We are really trying to address the root causes of digital equity and not just the symptoms. And so with that, we have over 200 plus partners, 300 plus certified instructors, and I'll get into what that means in a short bit. But we are situated in the city of Boston, Essex County, and we are moving into Western and Central Massachusetts as well. And we're happy to be here. Before I begin, I would love an opportunity to, if we could move to the next slide, that would be great. I would love an opportunity to ask you all one question. If you could define digital equity for yourself in one word and put it in the chat. And I'll give everyone a couple seconds to do so. But I'd love to hear what digital equity means to you in one word. Excellent. Great. Thank you all. Everything that is identified in the chat currently describes the purpose and intentionality of the work that you see Evan has described and Kate has described as well, and I'll shortly go into. We are really trying to ensure that we create that access, that we give connections, we provide growth opportunities, and that we allow everyone to feel like that they are adequate when it comes to the digital space. And so I'll talk a little bit about our work right now, if we can go to the next slide, but I thank you all for participating in that aspect. So let's talk a little bit about what TGH does. TGH, we have a formula of impact. And what we try to do is what we call addressing the three legs of the stool. The first you see here are computers and devices. We provide an iPad or a Chromebook. Depending on the age group, we are serving anywhere from ages 3 to 96. Yes, that is correct. We serve as little as 3 years old, and we have reached someone who is as old as 96 years old in an effort to address this issue of digital equity. Can you tap to the next? The next thing we provide is connectivity. As you can imagine, high quality, affordable internet is very important, and we provide that at no cost to our learners. And we ensure that we eliminate any barriers that they might have for having that access. And then the next thing that we provide is training. We give 15 hours of digital training. You ask, how does this work? With the partner organizations that we have, we use a trainer-trainer model where we actually will train the staff of some of the organizations that we're partnered with. We will educate them on how to develop curriculum, how to manage classrooms, how to incorporate surveys, and how to make sure that they are serving as a lead support for their learners throughout the process, just to simply make sure that they understand how to use the computer, how to access things on the internet, and also how to ensure that they have proper tools for financial planning, for setting up emails, for telehealth and other items. And then what we call this is digital inclusion, because we believe that this is lasting access for the digital world, is the opportunities and resources that it can offer. And we believe that if we are able to give them a computer, give them connectivity, and train them, that they will be a part of the new world in which they have felt like they've been hidden from before. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little about our work in Essex County, particularly. What you'll see here is that we have discovered that 12% of the households in Essex County do not have secure broadband access, and 20% of the households do not have a laptop or a desktop at home. Next, we have here 90% of the neighborhoods with the lowest rates of broadband and computer access live in the community of Lynn and Lawrence here in Massachusetts. These are populations which carry a lot of immigrants, in addition to family members who are completely on the outside, and not just on the outside from a digital access, but also from some of the fundamentals that we take for granted in the access points as we have from financial resources. And so we are grateful to be in these communities because we want to address people where they are. We want to meet their needs directly, and we want to make sure that they understand their voice matters, and that we are at the table with them, and that they are not the subject on the table. Next slide, please. And then we have had our pilot that took place in Essex County from June of 21 through May of 22. This is a picture here of a graduating class. And they, as you can tell from their smiles, they had a great experience, and that they enjoyed the opportunity to learn through the tutelage of the people that they interact with on a day-to-day basis. Because again, our goal is to work with our partner organizations who've already developed this trust, who already understand the individuals that they are serving in their plights, and that they are willing to be that support for them in all facets of the work. Next slide. And I see some questions in there that I'll get to shortly thereafter that I see are formulated in the chat. Thank you for providing them. Let's talk a little about the partnership. June of 21, we launched this partnership to make TGH programming available to the residents of Essex County. And it was really because we found that collaboratively, we could work together to really build out what digital equity should look like. And we use this opportunity to actually showcase that if we were to work together, putting philanthropic resources connected to programming, we can make a difference and a huge impact in the lives of many individuals who were feeling as if that they again were on the outside and needed that helping hand. And with that, ECCF created this opportunity where they provided 3 years of support to enable us to reach 7 municipalities across the county, including 6 gateway cities. And we really were deep diving into the trenches of these communities in an effort to really make sure that we were able to give them that direct connection, make sure that at the end of the training that they felt successful and that they could go on and create some generational impact for themselves. Partnership led to a pilot of about 50 households across the 5 program sites and the 5 municipalities. And then we concluded with over 100 learners by the end of May of 22. This has been and continues to be one of the most impactful partnerships that we've had at TGH during our time. And I want to talk a little bit at the next slide about what that has led to. We piloted with 5 program sites, Lawrence Community Works, Make It Haverhill, North Shore CDC, Latino Support Network, Wellspring House, all exclusive organizations that are doing phenomenal work in the community, as touch points, making sure that they are serving the people and making sure that they are trying to change the lives of the people. And so it was very easy for us to work with them and to ensure that they had the resources to conduct courses and to make impact. I'll use, for example, and I think you saw on a previous slide, Make It Haverhill. This is probably during our period of the pilot, this organization was volunteer-led completely from top to bottom. And they were coming in after work to make sure that they opened up the space to make it available to the neighbors in the community so that they could learn what it was to have access to computers, to the internet, and that they could start to find jobs. They could connect with their family members in other countries, and that they could actually make a change in their life in a positive way because they had already felt so down based upon some of the circumstances in which they were dealing with. This organization is doing phenomenal work, and we're excited to have partnered with them. Can we go to the next slide? And let's talk about the course languages. 17% of our courses are in English. 33 anymore. What happened? All right. 33% are bilingual Spanish and English, and 50% of our courses are ran in Spanish. And that is to show you that it is not just those who you would assume need the support, but there are a lot of people out there who are trying to be reached, and we are making our best effort to adjust our curriculum to meet into.
Bien, ¿y tú?
Okay. And so we're trying our best to meet that demand. Thank you. Next slide. Let's talk about the learner demographics. If you think about it from a language we've already spoken to, 70% is Spanish, 26% English, 4% other. From a race and ethnicity perspective, 16% white, 13% Black, 2% multiracial, and 69% Latino or Latinx. And then 80% of the income households are below $35,000 per year. And so our real goal in this is, if we think about this, is how do we take families from a $35,000 household to a $50,000 household? You give them digital access, you teach them how to do the work, and then you provide opportunities for them in the workforce space so that they can create those opportunities for themselves. Because we want to make sure that we are creating independency instead of dependency on the resources that are available. That is our goal here at TGH and in our partnership with ECCF. Next slide, please. Program success. 100% of our graduates report learning skills that have improved their lives. 94% of the graduates report that they've already have or plan to get home internet access, compared to 73% who had internet at the time of the enrollment. 45% of the grads report they are more likely to use their internet for health and wellness, and 67% of our grads report that they are more likely to use internet communicating with others. Whereas 47% of our grads report they are more likely to use the internet for job resourcing. And 80% of our grads report that they are more likely to use the internet for educational purposes. As you can see from this slide, there are a variety of needs that are being met and have been met based upon the success of this program and the outreach that has been done. And we are very excited about our results. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little about what happens beyond the pilot. The pilot is concluded with over 100 learners, over 120 additional graduates since the end of the pilot, and 800 households will be reached by the end of the three-year grant period. We've built partnerships with additional organizations across the county, and these, you see them listed here: the YMCA, Greater Lawrence Community Action Council, Sacred Heart School Lynn, the City of Lynn, the Council on Aging. We are reaching anywhere from, again, ages 3 to 96, and we are trying to make sure that we give them the access points that they need. Next slide.
Great. Thanks, Marvin.
Thank you.
I know that we'll get to questions, but just to wrap this up so that we can get to questions, you can see how what Marvin just discussed, that investment is touching all of those targets that we had. And just to talk about how we pivoted from both Evan's data and what we learned from Marvin, if you look at the bottom, this is a sneak preview of what our year 2 initiative digital equity strategy is going to be. You can see it's a circle now, and in the middle of that circle is sustainability and adoption. So that train the trainer model in now up to 14 sites across the county is really building that capacity. We have 4,000 nonprofits in Essex County. The ones we're touching, right, it's continuing to grow. You can train that trainer model around, and that's true for all sorts of interventions that we're doing in our investment. But sustainability is really important, right? Once you train the trainer, the empowerment is on that organization, right? Which is really, really exciting. So we're happy about that. The top right-hand corner, we've taken Evan's data, we've taken the work we've done, and we've mapped out our investment. You can see, so there's an interactive map that will go around and everyone can play with it at your leisure. But we built it out so that the little black spots with the access points are the investment in access points. The green dots are coalition members, and the purple dots are the literacy sites that Marvin was just talking about. So there's up to 14 of them now. It's hard to see here, but we won't go through the interactive piece unless we have time. And then the yellow is where we've handed out our laptops across the county. So you can see all that investment area overlaid with the data that Evan showed earlier, all lines up. So we're investing where we should be investing, and it's community-based and driven. And a couple of other things we're doing for the future is looking at telehealth navigators and how do we have 3 federally qualified health centers in Essex County. How do we coordinate with them and invest in them so that they can be giving their patients access to the video version of telehealth now that the rules are going to change in the future. So we've invested in 2 humans, so they're human navigators, both at the North Shore and the Lynn Community Health Center. We've done a technology workforce think lab, bringing together cross-sector leaders, business leaders, and others. And we summarize that event. We can share it with everyone. But that also feeds into our e-refurbished program, right? So those businesses now come to the table and they are donating devices. And then finally, we have a digital equity competition that ECCF funds. And we work with UMass Lowell and iHub and Haverhill and an Entrepreneur for All organization that trains entrepreneurs. And so it's a really entrepreneurial-based grant program that we run live at the end of the month. So we'll be sure to let you all know how that goes. So I want to thank everyone for letting us present, and we'll turn it back over to you, Sherry, and to you at the Patterson Foundation to run us through the rest of the programming. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. That was a wonderful presentation. And I think we're going to start with the questions in the chat. It looked like there were a few for Marvin, and it looks like Marvin answered. Wonderful. Okay. I'm looking through the chat really quickly.
And can I just add to that question about devices to Marvin?
Yes.
As part of the system change effort that we're investing in, right, and being able to share resources across. So they're getting new devices with Marvin, but over time, as either they outgrow those devices or other members of the household need them, we have that e-refurbishment program where organizations or individuals can request a free device, and that can be given out back into the ecosystem. So just to add that into there.
Wonderful, thank you. There was a question asking if connectivity means adding broadband infrastructure or opening up existing networks.
That's a great question. In terms of philanthropic investment, right? So we're not going to be building networks, nor do we have the expertise to do that. And plus, that's really labor and cost intensive, right? And we all know from a funding standpoint that may be less easy to fundraise for, right? But there are federal and state dollars and infrastructure dollars that can do such a thing in terms of building out networks or creating, the pipe and the better connection from the ISP. We also do partner with our ISPs. So it's a multi-pronged, right? It's like, where can philanthropy come to the table, help convene, help bring people together, both from the state and the federal side on that infrastructure investment, but also on the ISP side. And then where does philanthropic dollars kind of fill the void for some funding streams that are not there? So while we're not giving large millions and millions to build networks, right, we are providing the connective tissue to get people to the funding source.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to pose a question to our attendees. Can you guys give me either a show of your real hand, or you can raise your Zoom virtual hand? So show of hands, is anyone currently using data to advance digital equity in their own communities? See some Zoom hands coming up. Okay. Do one of you want to come off mute and share what your organization is doing in their community and your experience? Beatrice, do you want to come up and share?
Hi, thank you for calling me out. I will remind myself not to raise my hand ever again. We're located in St. Petersburg, and initially our digital inclusion project started about 2.5 years ago. Actually, we were going to start with Tech Goes Home. We have a partner at the Innovation District, Allison Barlow, who found out about it at a Smart Cities conference, but then COVID happened. And so we were compiling data as to where the gaps were with respect to internet accessibility. So we were sort of flying by the seat of our pants. We had some information about where the gaps were, and we could see it more in real time. The initiative is now housed within the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay. I mean, today's my second day here. So I've been attending these work scans because we were still a volunteer-led organization. So that's why I'd asked the question, but we have data about where the gaps are, and that's what we were able to use to actually lead us to get funding from the Community Foundation of Tampa, well, how our initiative got funded. But I'm more interested in how we can dig down into the levels that Evan mentioned. So that's really where we are now. We need to be able to produce numbers. And I guess you answered it, Evan. You said, look at the census data, the census tracts to get the data. So I don't know if that answered that question. I don't think that I did.
No, you did. Thank you for coming off mute and sharing. Evan, do you have anything to add to data tracking and going deeper?
I mean, I think the census is the place to start, better than building out custom surveys of your region. Those can be helpful as a supplement. But we were also kind of pushed by Kate and folks at ECCF to develop some new tools and techniques for working with that data. So yeah, it took some time, but we were able to build out a toolkit that's really effective, and people are interested. The other kind of, well, you need help with this, but for microdata, it's IPMS. There's a project at the University of Minnesota, and you sort of have to go through them for the best kind of census data for something like this.
Okay.
Thank you. And before we move into our workshop discussion, I'm actually going to ask Kate, and I'll give you a moment to pull up the interactive online map of data, because I think that might be helpful for our attendees here. So if you could share your screen once you have it to show us the interactive map and how it can be used, I think that would be great before we dive into a discussion.
Great. we'll do. Like Beatrice, I was prepared here once you said, Kate, you're about to do something. So I perked up. So can folks see my screen? Yes, thumbs up, great. So here is this is the 34 cities and towns north of Boston in Essex County. I'm gonna highlight first the access piece. You can toggle over these and see where we've made our investments. Again, from access, traditional boys and girls clubs, but also places like homeless shelters and food pantries. Then if you layer on, let me show you just literacy, because we were here with Marvin. These sites are all the places, and you can remember that when we talked about the pilot, we were 5. You see more than 5 dots here, right, everyone? That's because of what Marvin was talking about, is that we've expanded that investment, right? We're responding to that data, we're responding to the community, furthering that investment, and that ecosystem is working, and the TGH team is fantastic at doing that. And we're also featuring them in our coalition, so people are learning about it in other spaces, and now there's a waiting list of people that want to get this service. And then equipment, here you can see where we've given out those devices. Actually, there's more spots on this. We just need to update it. And then coalition, where some of our coalition members are. That's not one person, that's groups of individuals or large concentrations. And one thing I wanted to show you all is if you put this all together, the darker the shade of the town, the more investment dollars have gone into that space. So that aligns directly with Evan's data, right? Which shows where are the gaps, where's the digital divide. Any questions on this before I stop sharing? And Rachel, you tell me, so I'm going to stop sharing here.
There is a question in the chat on how do you do digital literacy in Spanish and other languages in the community?
Sure. So the way it works is that we actually develop curriculum in those languages in an effort to ensure that the learner gets a more natural experience. And so hopefully that gives you the answer.
It looks like it. Thank you, Marvin.
Thank
So
you.
we're going to move into a workshop discussion. So each of you submitted questions in the registration form, and we'd like to bring those into our discussion today. Before we start, does anyone have any other burning questions they'd like to ask before they dive in?
Can I just comment one thing on, I think it might have gotten a little bit lost in translation on the map.
Yeah.
Rachel, before we move. So I wanted to make sure everyone knew, as a funder, right, and also as from a transparency side, and as a community member, we wanted to take what Evan had done, right, and all this data that drove us towards the strategy process, which we've been involving people with all along, and give them something to interact with digitally, right, to see where is this investment going. That's an accountability and that's a transparency as well, but also allows our community to start interacting and questioning, to say, well, why is there not investment here, or having opening dialogue. So it's been a really great opening dialogue function tool for us, as well as letting our nonprofits use that in their fundraising efforts, as well as our partners. So thanks, Rachel, for letting me pop that in.
Of course. So our first question for the panel is, how does data inform your decision making? And I think we've touched on that a little bit, but if any of you want to dive a little deeper on that question.
So I can go first, and Marvin, Evan, please hop in here. But you can see real time, and what we've been trying to do here is show you through those steps on both as a funder how we've evolved, and also how the community has had us pivot. So sometimes we're testing things and we're higher risk and we're testing something and it's not working the way it was designed. So maybe we need to either do a redesign or we need to rethink about a different intervention. So I would just recommend that kind of flexibility if it's possible, and to listen to the community. And we've also pivoted based on Evan's refresh of the data, right? We saw that now we've got movement of people because of COVID. People are not living in the same spaces, and we can now justify investment in maybe housing or affordable housing areas that are juxtaposed or just next to our gateway cities where our investment is, but that's where people are now living. People are now moving to because of space constraints, etc. We are Massachusetts. We do have old housing stock. So the other thing that has helped us pivot is that we're learning how to build in old mill buildings. We're learning how to put up internet in water obstructed places, which may be relevant to some of the folks here on the call. But we're really using that qualitative and quantitative feedback, as well as for Marvin and his team in the program of, okay, what's working, where are we having our biggest success with numbers of students that are interested, et cetera. And maybe there needs to be more investment in that area, or maybe we need to work harder in other spaces.
Can I add, I think even prior to all of this, there's just a commitment to add data gathering to the kind of philanthropic practice. It's very easy to kind of make grants and tick boxes and think that equals impact. And it's a little harder to say, let's invest in some research, because you can't then go back and say, well, we changed people's lives with this research. Like it's a prior step, but it's really valuable for maximizing the impact on the back end. And I don't know, Kate, how you feel about it, but it seems like that's been a really kind of thoughtful change in the way that you and some other foundations are thinking about the process of having impact and where money should go through this process.
And it will continue. It'll continue to drive our systems change interventions as we move forward.
Yeah, I just want to poke in there and say that the data is driven by the people that are being served. And that is the critical element for us as we use data. We are evaluating consistently around what is the impact, what are the goals, and what is the impact, and then how do we adjust? So we'll find that each course will make an adjustment based upon the surveying of the previous course, because we want to make sure that we are continuously working to get it right. It doesn't mean it will be perfected, but it does mean it will be closer to something that our learners can have a greater experience with. So the data is definitely driving those decisions, but it also is, again, it tells the human story that I think sometimes gets overlooked because we're so focused on numbers that we don't actually look at those numbers and realize that they represent people. And so I would add that as well.
Marvin, thank you so much for that comment, because it's so important for us to remember that, and it grounds us in what we're hearing back from the community too. And just a shout out to my colleague Michelle, who's on this call, who is our communications director, but she's actually a storyteller, and working with partners like Marvin and Evan and others to tell that story, and our nonprofits especially, because it really helps raise up our nonprofits, which is what our #1 target goal is to do, and the residents that they serve. So thank you for that, Marvin.
Great. I'm going to move us on to question 2 for the panel. So our second question is, what's working in Essex County and what has evolved? I think all of you have touched on this a little bit, but maybe speak about a certain example or dive a little deeper in here.
I'll start us off. What has clearly evolved is our Tech Goes Home partnership. And that, driven by the people and the partners that Marvin talked about, make it behavioral, the people on the ground, but mostly in the people we're serving, our residents. Because there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of demand, and now from an evolutionary standpoint, we have graduates of the TGH program who now want to go on to further and deepen their experience with our workforce boards, with others, with maybe more complex trainings, et cetera, which is why you could see we're having those workforce discussions and working with the Commonwealth and others on that type of infrastructure, as well as our, for-profit businesses that do that type of work within the county. So I'll turn it over to Marvin and Evan if you have things to add to that, but that's one good example.
I think that's spot on. I think we came into Essex County without completely understanding what we were walking into, because, as you enter new territory, there are a lot of terrains in which you're not familiar with. But I think having this partnership with ECCF has really allowed us to grow quickly and to scale and to be able to figure out, what is going to be required as we think about growing in other areas. So I think that this relationship, as described by Kate, has been wonderful. And I really believe that our graduates have kind of set the bar for how we want to move towards the future. And so that's what I would add.
I guess I can speak to it. One of the things that there are parts of the country where the biggest challenge for broadband access is infrastructure. In Essex County, the biggest challenge is poverty. And I think that's true actually in more places than people recognize. I think a lot of people have their heads that actually it's infrastructure, it's laying cables, but actually poverty is the bigger problem here. And I think it's the bigger problem in most places. And kind of recognizing that allows you to really tailor solutions. And it's one reason I mentioned the Affordable Connectivity Program, the government subsidies program. If poverty is the problem and affordability is the problem, then subsidies can be an effective solution. And one of the things that has come out, at least to the work I've been involved with, is seeing where towns are really taking advantage of those subsidies, what kinds of wraparound efforts really make those subsidies most effective, and then trying to build that out to other towns to say, hey, here's a package of things that makes those subsidies most effective and most valuable.
And so we've taken that data directly from Evan, and we've started to do pilots on the American Connectivity Plan, and ways to say, you know what, you need that community-based, trust-based intervention, right? It all goes back to community in order to test this, pilot it, it's complex, and to get it to work, right? And so that's part of another data-driven process that we have done. But affordability, and it's also the way what data has done is helped us talk about this issue, right? Because most people just think about, at the beginning when we first started this, it was like, well, Essex County seems pretty connected. I mean, why would you make this investment? Does this make sense? But when you de-aggregate that data, like we discussed, and you talk about, it's not just internet access, right? It's water obstructions, it's state last mile infrastructure issues. It's urban areas where ISPs maybe decrease the amount of equity in that connection, right? It's number of people in a household and number one, affordability. So being able to talk about what access is has really helped with that data.
All right, I'm gonna move us on to question 3 for the panel.
Can I just add one point
Yes.
to that last point? One of the things that has evolved the most is that there's a voice has come out of this. The people who are in need their voices being heard and it's recognized. And the ECCF has done a great job of giving them a platform to actually be understood and giving them the lane to actually start to see what access looks like. And I think we should underscore that, because sometimes you have a problem, but there's something when you have a problem and others try to create resolution for it and don't just leave the problem in existence. And so I just want to make sure that we underscore that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marvin. So what are some ways that nonprofits can be partners beyond the funding to help communities and ecosystems thrive?
I'll start off. Willing participation, right? So we have our partners and our nonprofits, right, raising their hand to say, you know what? We want to pilot that. We want to test that, right? We want to have conversations. It may not be directly related to funding in that moment, but they're willing to have those conversations, both with their leadership infrastructure, as well as sharing the problems that they're facing as our nonprofits. Like often it's our nonprofits that are, front line servicing these individuals that we're targeting, but often they lack the resources as well. So to have the conversations to educate us, to say this is what we're lacking and we need that infrastructure, and to say, you know what, it's okay to ask for that type of thing. Maybe it's not financial, maybe it's a donated laptop, right? Maybe it's donating a laptop to us, because we've often had that as well. Or maybe it's internships and ways to strengthen the staff at these nonprofits. So I think we found a lot of opportunities to give people empowerment to get involved in the process, even if they aren't using financial forms in the form of money or asking for that piece. So that and the ability to participate in a coalition. And like Marvin was saying, and thank you for that comment, Marvin, that meant a lot. Saying, now we can and now I can represent my organization or represent myself as an individual on a coalition, speak up, have a platform, and have a space to put that information and to give the feedback, both as a nonprofit, as a partner, but also for their individuals that they represent. And I think the other way is, often in philanthropy, we may put out a grant program that might not be accessible and continues to perpetuate problems, because maybe that's what we're used to, that's how we do it, or we post things online, right? We know that in the digital divide, not everyone in our nonprofits can access those grants. So what has been really helpful with those leaders, and we have a leadership advisory as well that advises us on how to go about this, is how can you create equity in your grant making space? How can you be approachable? How can you have conversations outside of the traditional forums that we may be used to still have the integrity, but to really kind of pivot how we go about things. So I thank you to my colleagues for letting me go on about that for a minute there.
Yeah, I would just add that nonprofits can serve differently by serving as strategic partners, strategic thinkers, strategic
Yes.
evaluators. It is very important to begin to process a little bit above the board. Let's get to the root cause of what we're dealing with, and let's start to tackle that, because sometimes we get caught up in the symptoms. And I think that there's just an opportunity here for nonprofits to really showcase their talent and their ability to see the issue at hand as greater than this moment, and think a little bit long-term about sustainability for, making sure that you're not just resolving it, but that you're making true impact.
And to Marvin's point, that's a great point, Marvin. As the funder, to say, you know what, I can take a risk, maybe a higher risk with this organization because of that leadership, because of that feedback as a partner here, right? We're partners. You remove that power dynamic and you say, let's partner on this. Let's maybe take a higher risk than we would. Let's test it. Let's pilot it. And let's then think about together how we scale that, and then give other nonprofits opportunities to say, you know what, the way that was executed XYZ in that neighborhood or in that community doesn't work for us, but this might work for us. So that flexibility and listening to that nonprofit is incredibly empowering, and encourage funders to do that.
Oh, I don't have anything to add on this point. I think that was, yeah. Second.
Thank you, panel. That's going to wrap up our discussion. Thank you to Maribel for taking our notes. Everyone is going to receive these notes in the follow-up email. So we're going to move into our Q&A, and we'd like to take any questions you may have or thoughts that you'd like to share. And we are going to drop an after action survey in the chat. So if you would like to fill that out, right after the session, that would be much appreciated. But at this time, I'll have you raise your Zoom hand if you have a question, and you can ask our panel. I see Amanda's hand first, and then we'll go to Colleen.
Hi, yeah, I just had a question about the train the trainer model, and I might have missed it. So are you going into the organizations that you're partnering with and training a staff member there, or how is that working?
Yes, that is how we are. That's the way it works. We train the staff. Mm-hmm.
Or it could be a volunteer, right, Marvin, too?
Correct. But when I say staff, I mean the organization's liaison. So yes, correct. Volunteer or staff.
Thank you. We'll go to Kaleem.
Yep, it's Kellum.
Hello.
Yeah, I think it's more of a comment than a question, but I think that there was the broader question about how what organizations can do that doesn't require funding. And I think in the work that I've done around digital inclusion, it's the exposing people to the services that are out there, like ACP, or exposing them to the fact that they can get a computer for free frequently through organizations like Marvin's. I think those are also really, really critical functions, because from what we've also seen is a lot of times people feel that they have the cell phone. So why do I need home internet? Why do I need a computer? Well, it's also just helping people understand that if you don't have those, it's hard to do a lot of other things.
That's a great comment. Just to respond to that quickly is that I think what we've seen in TGH programming in some of our spaces is that there's starting off the programming, and Marvin, hop in here, with the mobile phone piece as kind of the precursor, and then taking a pivot to the machine, and that our nonprofits are doing that too, to get people comfortable with starting to make that connection, because we know that cell phone bills and internet access, mobile phones, it's hard to fill out a housing application or something like that on a mobile phone. So from an equity lens.
Yeah, we to Kate's point, we try our best to again meet our learners where they are, and not enforce upon them what our expectations are of them. And so if it is that we are needing to utilize a cell phone in the initial engagement, we can do that, and then we could adapt and get them to a point where the Chromebook device is used later on. So we try our best to again reach them in whatever is their most comfortable position.
Excellent. I thought I saw Beatrice's hand raised. Maybe. Beatrice, did you have a question?
I did. I just wanted to make sure I understood the connection between Tech Goes Home and ECP. So Tech Goes Home went to Essex County, correct? Or
Yes, that is correct. So
okay.
the relationship is that we are funded by ECCF in Essex County.
Okay.
We conduct our programming there.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. We do have a question in the chat from Sarah. I think it's meant for Kate, who mentioned earlier about how they work to connect people to broadband by targeting the multifamily dwelling units where the data showed high rates of lack of connectivity. Can you share more about how they did that, connecting to ACP and other cities and partnerships?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, for the great question. So in that neighborhood that I showed you all in the city of Salem, with that colorful picture we showed you, that neighborhood, we actually used infrastructure funding in partnership with the Commonwealth. And then we used philanthropic funding. So for the actual hardware, philanthropic funding for the community-based aspect of it. So like the landing page, and then also the outreach work. So we have neighborhood volunteers that manage each part of that neighborhood, which is a very small, dense neighborhood, about a square mile. But they each have units and residents that they're responsible for, as well as we have a small business coordinator that we help support in our small business ecosystem effort. I told you all that we invest in lots of different systems change efforts. So we take the financial literacy and the small business infrastructure, as well as the loan fund that we have helped set up with banks, and then taking the capital and offsetting the risk with philanthropy. We take all those things combined, as well as our Creative County initiative, to say, how can we maximize our partnerships in this neighborhood, and then use our systems-based approach to invest in those pieces. So whether it's the person knocking on the door for adoption, whether it's our tech collaborative partners and their refurbished devices and giving them out for beta testing, whether it's the actual infrastructure and partnership with the state, right? So it's a conglomeration of things brought together. We do have ACP pilots. It's not in that neighborhood. We're doing the ACP pilot right now. We're actually doing a homelessness transition pilot with one of our shelters and one of our organizations that's really strong, called Citizens in Essex County. And what they do is put families in transition who don't yet have that permanent stable housing with a hotspot, and then the idea is to move them into an ACP model when their housing stabilizes. And then in that new neighborhood I was telling you about, where we're trying a residential piece that's newer, we have to use a different model because we had all sorts of different other infrastructure issues, brick, water, lots of different things. So there we're still in the process of figuring out what makes sense, but that will probably require, to someone's point earlier, an actual infrastructure investment by an ISP. And we will work that out as a ecosystem, as a coalition together. So I hope that helps, but it's case by case and community driven, depending on what it is.
Thank you, Kate. Do we have any other questions from our attendees for the panel? I'm looking on 2 screens of people here.
Well, I just got one quick question if there are no questions.
Yes.
Could everybody do one more quick favor? There's a question there, are youth involved and to what extent? I'll take the lead on that, and then anybody else can jump in. So we do involve ourselves with youth by working with the schools and local community centers as well, in an effort to make sure that we're reaching all populations. And so they are either involved, some of our partnerships that we're working on will include that there are seniors paired with some youth in an effort to do some cross-generational approaches, but also just to ensure that the young people have an opportunity to actually learn to teach this work, but also to have patience as well as is working with elders and making sure that they're learning from the elders and their experience too.
And that's a great point, Marvin. Thanks for bringing that up too, and whoever put that in the chat. To expand upon what Marvin just said, so as part of our digital equity competition that I was telling folks about, 2.0 is coming up, but we did one last year. In that, one of the winners is that collaboration for literacy training in between a senior center and a youth center, so that they're coming together to provide that cross-generational training that Marvin just was talking about, but also getting our university students involved and our community college students involved in setting up our networks, which is in progress right now. We are also putting up and standing up networks in our youth intervention, especially with women and girls in STEM. In youth intervention there, so they have the access, but also internship opportunities for them to get used to and introduced to STEM-based and IT-based positions early on, right in the 6th to 8th grade range, as well as ECCF helps work with an at-risk youth internship program where we're getting students out into the community during the summer and hands-on training as well.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'm going to ask one that was submitted from the form, the registration form. So a question that I'm seeing here is about public-private partnerships and how effective they are in increasing digital access in communities. We've touched on that a little bit, but I think another side of that question is, how can we prevent communities from being left behind? Kate, Evan, Marvin, who wants to speak on this?
That's a great question, and one that is always hard because a lot of it is dependent upon the organization and their leadership and their approach to some of the work. You have to ensure that that you are a part of the conversations, or that you are connected to some of those who are a part of the conversations in an effort to bring your agenda to the table. But I would definitely ensure that you are reaching out to some of those leads on this digital equity work in your spaces and trying to find ways to build relationships with them. And then ask them, I would, not be afraid to ask, is there a possible opportunity for us to sit and talk and to examine this work a little bit more intimately, and you can hear about the work that we're doing and see if there's a way for us to partner and align our efforts. And then if there are any larger meetings that are taking place, how do we get ourselves involved? I think sometimes we think that there are mysterious ways about getting to some of these meetings, but in fact, there really aren't, because it's really about making the effort to reach out to organizations that you believe are doing great work and saying, here we are doing some work on our own, and we'd love to figure out a way to create a partnership together. So I would just strictly make sure that you are doing outreach and that you are unafraid to ask the questions that are important to you and the people you serve. and make sure that their voice is always at the table. If you're talking about homelessness, for example, you want to make sure that you're speaking from a homelessness perspective, someone who is homeless, and if you've never had that experience, then you want to talk about the stories that you are familiar with, and those conversations. You want to relate that into those spaces, because I think that most of all, people are looking for that natural experience and more than they're looking for that theoretical angle. So.
And to add upon that as well is, as a convener or as someone from, the county effort in which we do not have a county government, to say, if we hear someone needing something, right, encouraging them to add voices, right, but also empowering our individuals within the county to bring their own chair and hold accountable those people that we have partners with to make space at that table, and to continue that process. And that's something that Evan might want to comment on as well.
Well, I just think that the public-private partnership side of this is really interesting because, very often that is an alignment challenge that has to be faced. How do you get private sector actors and public sector actors to work? But I actually think it kind of underestimates the complexity of the alignment challenge in this space, where it's how do you get the federal government action to work with the state government action, to work with the municipal, county and municipal government action, to work with businesses that control access, in this case, to work with nonprofits on the ground. That's a really complicated set of alignment challenges, each of which requires some kind of intervention and discussion. But I don't want to underestimate it. The flip side of it, there are opportunities at each of those. The federal government is doing stuff. At least our state government is doing stuff. Lots of counties and cities are doing things. So getting these people to talk is an opportunity to accelerate change. But you have to think about the full panoply of actors and dimensions.
The other thing I want to add, if you don't mind, is your partnerships with your local officials, city councils, state representatives, state senators. They work for you, and they work for your organization. And so it is very important that you take advantage of those relationships by bringing your agenda to the conversation and explaining to them why this work is critically important and it needs to be advanced in the halls of government. If you are not doing that, I would strongly encourage you to do so. If you are uncomfortable with doing that alone, I would strongly encourage you to identify 2 to 3 other organizations that are doing work similar to yours and creating your own small mini coalition and then going before them, because voices matter. And the larger the group, the more sound that you have. I don't want to create a revolution, but I want you to understand that you have power within your reach. And if you are willing to take the steps, you can get those leaders who are interconnected with your community to actually become a champion for your work. And it will ensure that the additional resources come your way strictly based upon some of those conversations.
Thank you, panel. I'm going to turn things back over to Sherry Corrier to close us out for this session. Sherry.
Thank you, Rachel. Everybody hang on for just a couple minutes. We promised to close out, but I knew when I saw this information and Rachel and I got a chance to see it before the rest of you that you were going to love this session. I want to thank Kate and Evan and Marvin for the great sharing and your partnership and collaboration and all the wonderful questions. Also, before we go, if you could just quick come back on screen real quick, we want Kelly to take a picture of this fantastic group for the history book so we can keep it. Thanks for coming on. People come back on. Kelly, you'll let us know about when to smile.
Yes, I'm gonna just a couple seconds here. I see some people still turning on their cameras, and I'm gonna have to do 2 because we have so many people here. We have 2 screens. So yep, my first screen is ready. Okay. 1, 2, 3. And my second screen, 1, 2, 3. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And everyone, Kelly's going to bring up just 2 more slides so we can make sure that you have access to all this great information. And also what we'd like to do is to make sure to thank our co-host here, the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, Sarah and her team on board, and the wonderful sharing out of that information. The next workshop, our workshop number 6, is measuring ecosystem change in digital access. How do we know it's working? You can sign up for that. It's May 2nd, same time slot. We also have a QR code scan, and we'll be sending out more information to all of you that registered. You'll also be receiving a follow-up after action. Again, you'll get one more opportunity to fill out the after action survey, which really helps us improve the quality of our sessions. It also keeps you informed and allows you to gain access to all the materials. So we would really hope that you would all continue to stick with us here for our next sessions. And I want to thank you again. Great, fantastic feedback. And to everyone that participated, we hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much. And you can follow Digital Access for All and the Patterson Foundation at these hashtags and Twitter, Instagram, all of our social media handles. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.